Welcome to Building Great Sales Teams, a show dedicated to making sales teams tick, tick, boom. Great sales teams are not recruited, they are built, block by block. Let's get to work.
All right, guys, we got Brenda Neckvatal here. She's a two-time best-selling author. She specializes in crisis management, and it's going to be very interesting what that is later on. But government contracting, HR, she's a contributor to Forbes, Entrepreneur.com, Fast Company, Inc., and many more. She was also deemed the HR force of nature, and now she's taken a turn. She's actually the CEO and instructor for aerial recon training and chief air boss to the Drone Farm, a 144-acre drone training range in Wakefield, Virginia. Brenda, welcome, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. I know that's like a big mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah, I went through the profile and I broke it down to the key points and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you are a decorated HR officer, essentially is what I'm going to call you, okay?
That's fine. I'm good.
And that's where I kind of want to kick it off, because you've got some interesting stories that come from that experience in, contracting and HR. A few of them that you mentioned was workplace violence, a near stabbing. You had a case where a woman was being stalked, situations with national security and even homicide. So can you kind of just walk
which
us
one do you want first?
Yeah, I would say
which one's the juiciest?
The one that's been important to me lately, because I've been dealing with it a lot at my company, is the stalking women one.
Okay, because I was praying you weren't going to say the homicide one.
No.
So the stalking women. Yeah, we had a guy. So we had a female employee, and out of all of the workplace violence, and you can look these numbers up because it's actually put together by the FBI. The numbers for female deaths in workplace violence is like the highest out of all of workplace violence, like 51%. And it's all because of some form of domestic violence, where there is the former partner, the breakup, the jealous husband, the divorcee, right? They're the instigators of it. And you've known me now for a little while, and you've never heard me jump on the bandwagon saying, women rights, women. Right. I don't do that. I don't do it because I look at every human being equally. It's like, unless you got pointy ears and green blood and belong somewhere in a sci-fi novel, in my book, you're the same regardless of whether you have gifts, talents, or you have disabilities, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, but workplace violence, that's something that, believe it or not, a lot of people gaff off because they don't necessarily see the correlation between women getting hurt at work because of an ex or stalker boyfriend or stalker whatever, and it happens actually a lot more than people realize. So good companies will institute a program to where like everybody walks out to the parking lot in two. So like retail in the malls and stuff like that. Their loss prevention policy is that nobody's in the store by themselves. There's always at least one other person, because that helps against theft too. But there's another reason behind it, is that when you've got people that are leaving 10, 11 o'clock at night, you don't want your employees walking out into a darkened parking lot all by themselves, because they don't park under the lights. They don't park close. They have to park way, way, way the hell in the back.
Right.
So there's a safety element to this, and that's really what it's from. I had an employee, I had to walk out, and actually I walked her out because I implemented a safety program after an incident at work, and it was based off of I stopped a possible active shooter. It was definitely going in that direction. We got rid of him. So as a precaution, we would walk out in pairs. So I was walking her back out, and wouldn't you know it, there were two young black boys, hoods up, very baggy clothes, looking to break into vehicles. We parked on the 5th level of this parking lot. There's no reason why they had, and they're looking in windows, and there's no reason for them to be there. And she engaged them, which I wanted to smack the hell out of her.
Yeah.
And then like I saw one kid put his hands inside, and I'm like, oh crap, here we go. And then she started getting into an argument with him, and I turned and looked at her and I said, shut up. I said, you guys go, and we're not going to make a big deal out of this.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, if you open your trap one more time, we are both dead. Do you understand that? And it's not to profile anybody, but you're talking about 2 young guys who can outmuscle and outmaneuver us, who were clearly there trying to break into vehicles. And if you look, you can actually see their handprints, because there was construction. So you could see their single handprints on the door handles, because there was all the dust from construction. And I'm like, look, bad things happen to good people. Stop doing that. And conversely, you know what? We've seen people from all walks of life do stuff like that. I mean, the actor shooter guy, he was a white guy.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, folks that, like the one guy that was a near stabbing, they were white guys. You know, it doesn't matter. Humans do weird things. So, but, you know, there were in that case, in the parking lot, there were actual telltale signs that they were armed.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
no, that's some pretty crazy situations that you've had to deal with in the past. And, you know, as I look at, you know, our business and the different things we've had happen, they're all very elementary compared to some of that stuff, but I can see how they could grow into something like that, you know,
very
whether
quickly.
it be a, you know, inner work relationship and you've got the exes on both ends, you know what I mean? That type of stuff. I've seen a lot of that happen. Or like one salesperson's dating the other salesperson, and then 2 weeks later she's dating another salesperson. And so you got the jealousy between the 2 sales guys, you know,
yeah.
And it's so hard, you know, a lot of my people are W-2 now, but in the past they were 1099. So it's like I really have no control over what they do unless it's in the office, right? So once they left the office, it was like, you know what I mean? You know, even a W-2 employee, you don't have a lot of control of that. So, so I do have a question for you related to that. How do sales-centric organizations protect themselves with HR? Because it's like the last thing we think about. You know what I mean? We start hiring salespeople. We start
Yes,
making
it is.
It is. Let's be honest here. It's the last thing we think about.
It is.
And then the thing happens, right? For me, it was a longtime employee that filed a discrimination lawsuit against me. And then all of a sudden I was Mr. HR after that. You know what I mean? But it's often too late that type of stuff happens. So what can sales-centric organizations do to protect themselves with HR?
So you want to look at HR just like anything else that you do, with your key performance indicators, with your sales goals, with your expectations of dress and behaviors in customer facing environments. All those are just expectations. Mm-hmm. So you set the same expectation for behavior. You know, the thing is that when it comes to sales, you have to rely on an environment of people being mavericks, because you got to have a lot of bravery to do sales. Let's call it what it is, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have the self-confidence. You have to use ballsy and gutsy moves and phrases. And you know what works most of the time for a lot of people isn't going to work that one time. And next, you know, you're going to have a salesperson that's going to have a really bad day because they kind of got put in their place. Like they got put into a box by a customer or a prospect, and it's going to happen. Having policies, procedures that protect your business so you don't lose, because I know your story. And like you recently did a podcast episode on this about how you had to get rid of a key player on your team and it cost you guys about $1 million.
Yeah.
But you know what? In the long run, even though that hurt, that was the best $1 million you could have possibly lost, because imagine how much bad business that person would have brought in the long run.
Absolutely.
So, and that's a hard pill for ambitious leaders to swallow, because the number one responsibility of any leader, an apex leader like a CEO in a company, is to keep the doors open so they can make payroll. That's their responsibility, not make profit. So having somebody that has your back. HR is supposed to walk alongside the CEO, not as the yes person, not as, that little puppy dog jumping in the cartoon, walking up next to the big bulldog, right?
Right.
Is to sit there and say, you're about ready to step in it. And we need to stop you right now, right? Or that person to where the CEO can literally turn and say the 5 things that they would never be caught dead saying in front of anybody else, because they have nobody at their level that they can talk to. There's nobody else that they can trust with confidence their feelings, even though it could be a knee-jerk response. One of the worst things I've ever heard come out of a CEO's mouth is that I am not firing this because this person is of this ethnicity and I don't want to deal with that crap. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know what? And that's a real feeling. That's a real thing. And I'm like, this could be a cancel culture type of, podcast here for me. And I hope that certainly doesn't come that way, because that's not the intention. These are real conversations. These are real things that have happened. I've been doing this for 30 years. Trust me, there's very little I haven't heard. Does it mean that somebody really truly feels that way? No. People say things in the heat of the moment. What's worse is having a CEO that says something in the heat of the moment and actually does it.
Right.
Right. And so, or backs off of their core values or backs off of their position because they're afraid of losing something, right? They're afraid that if they get rid of this one person, somebody, like the whole thing is going to fall apart. Well, here's the thing. When you get rid of somebody who's a bad player in your team, it makes room for the better ones to come up.
100%.
It really does. So, and there's nothing more disheartening to employees in general is when the company kowtows or doesn't do anything about the bad employees.
And then forces them to continue to work in a possibly hostile work environment. Yeah. Negative environment.
Yep. And it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they're purple pinstriped or polka dotted. It really doesn't. Whoever has the bad attitude and is the biggest player, meaning they bring in the most money, usually is king of the hill. And like we both know Jessie Lee Ward. My favorite comment that she has ever made is that if you don't define your culture, somebody else will. Yeah. That goes hand in hand with workplace violence and all these other crazy things that I've had to deal with.
Yeah. I really appreciate Jessie Lee Ward. The speech that she gave at $1 Million Mastermind 21 was really impactful for me, understanding just the gifting piece that she utilizes. Yeah. And it's not for birthdays or anniversaries or anything like that. It's just because. And so we've begun utilizing that a lot internally, and it's done wonders for our culture. So that's pretty huge there. I'll admit wholeheartedly that I've been that CEO, you know what I mean, that you described earlier. Mine was I gave the women in my organization too many chances, you know what I mean? And it wasn't like anything, bad or anything. It was just, I was softer on the women in the organization, especially the salespeople, You
didn't hold them to the same standards.
Right. And it took Alicia, my wife, being in the HR role to say, hey, it's got to be the same standard across the board. We've got to put this, like you said, these KPIs in place, and then you terminate them if they don't reach their KPIs. Manager discretion, somewhat, but he's got to give a really good case, Right. And so she recognized those trends were happening. And most of my management was male, so we were all doing it, you know what I'm saying? It's like reverse sexism, I guess you could say, because we were giving them more chances, right? And so we instituted those policies and got rid of that. But that's what I've noticed more than anything. HR, what they do for you is they get rid of that like human element that makes mistakes, and they do that by establishing a baseline, like you said, the KPIs in the beginning, and everybody signs off on those. And then when they violate those, then you can point to that as the reason that you had to reprimand them, put them on a performance plan, or terminate them.
Yep. You have something actionable. And so, and it's interesting is that you said something. So they remove the human element. They remove the downside of the human element from leadership that doesn't work.
Right.
That's our job, right? But at the same time, we add the another element of human into the work, and that is recognizing the benefits and the gifts of the employees at the same time. And so, the number one responsibility of an HR professional is to really balance the very delicate balance, find it within doing the best interest of what's in the best interest of the company against doing what's in the best interest of the employees. And you know what? There have been many times where I told the bosses, like, hey guys, we're not winning today.
Yeah.
And what I mean, and they know what I mean by that. It's just like, okay, there's a bigger picture here that I'm spelling out as to why we wouldn't want to fire this person, why we would want to give them a chance. And usually it's because nobody else did before.
Yeah.
Nobody worked with this individual to make them better. I have two guys on my team right now. They're very different, very good-hearted. I got one that shows up who is awesome human being, but has told me point blank, I want to do a good job, but I need some help and I need some work. You know what? I'm going to spend as much time working with that person as I can. I got the other one who says, my heart is in this. I'm here. I'm going to show up for the meetings, and doesn't. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, he's elected himself out.
Right.
There's a difference. Like when you show up and you really come up with different, like, well, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? And they try and they haven't punched through that wall. That's the person I want to keep working with until, because eventually they're going to hit that wall with their fist and they're going to put a hole in it. And now they're going to find their path forward, So does it mean that I'm losing anything? Not really. Doesn't mean I'm gaining anything fast either. But when somebody gets something that they're good at, let them go at what they're great at. Don't worry about what you want them to be. Let them be great at doing what they're capable of.
No, that's a good point. I have one person on my team that he's worked with me for 5+ years, and I say it that way so you can't figure out who it is.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing the same thing.
So, and not a top performer. You know what I mean? Actually had some months where he cost me money, but his core values are so aligned in everything in all his actions, and just last month he had a few really big deals, and it made up for the 6 months that we, overpaid basically, you know what I'm saying? And I hate to look at people that way, and I don't. I look at the P&L on the person, of course, but I also look at the character and the core values of the person, because you can get a lot out of that long term if you pour into them, so that's a big deal there.
And you know what? This isn't foreign to any other type of group that you have either. It's not just limited to salespeople. I mean, I don't know if you saw my post this morning, but I this is where we go from HR into drones, right?
Right.
But I'm an admin of a beginner drone group on Facebook that my cousin started a year and a half ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's crazy. Thank you. Well, here's the story. So I was like the 10th person, like one of the top 10 people that jumped in on it a year and a half ago, right? And he's done an amazing job. And then May, he reached out to me, and I didn't see the message on Facebook. And then I started this whole drone, biz coach thing that I'm working on, because I've made a major life shift from HR into drones, because, they align, right?
Yeah.
And they're perfectly aligned.
We had this conversation a couple of Flying Fridays ago.
You're like, what are you thinking? I know. Anyway, so he says, hey, would you be willing to help me out? He said, this is a kind of a lot to deal with. And I said, sure. So I looked at the group. It went from 10 people to 83,000 people 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, hardly, when I started it. I'm like, hell yeah. So I'm looking at it. Now I'm looking at it as an entrepreneur and going, okay, so like, how am I going to be able to capitalize on this group, right? And so the first thing that I did is I paid attention to what was going on. And then I saw the BS that was taking place, the people coming in and slinging insults at other people. And I just started booting them. And, it's like I started booting them on my own without anybody reporting anything to the admin, even though there was a queue of about 130 complaints to the admin. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to clean this up. So I started watching what was going on. I started getting rid of people on my own. And then I did a video and I said, hey, just want to introduce myself. I'm Brenda the new blah, blah, blah. I've been in this group since it was started and really excited to be here. We appreciate you guys. We're making some changes. If you see something, say something and we're going to get rid of them. Oh my God. Let me tell you something.
The floodgates.
Woo! It was like having a room full of kindergartners pointing out who was doing what. And it was great because, we got rid of a lot of crap real fast. I now have probably blocked over about 2,000 people from the garbage. Yeah. I mean, and some repulsive stuff that has been posted in there. I mean, just like, are you kidding me? Who even thinks of this stuff? It's disgusting.
Right.
So we've been working on that. And what happened inevitably is because we addressed the culture. And, I talked to my cousin about it and I'm like, hey, I want to modify the rules. I want to start, and basically he's like, just go, right? I trust you. And that's what he said. I completely trust you. So I did. I modified our guidelines. And of course, I'm thinking it's like, okay, we say you can't spam. So how do I sell in this group, right? Because, you don't just have 83,000 people and don't do anything with it. So I started looking at that, and then the community started taking ownership because an admin took ownership. And now the community, I mean, they were good at helping people, but there were people that were holding back because some people were being nasty and crude. And I had one guy that instead of booting him, I actually flagged him. I said, hey, that comment is exactly the reason why you would get booted from this group, because why? Are you afraid of the truth? And I said, no, I don't have an issue with the truth. I said, but being crude about it, that's a different story. And you know what he did? He went back and he pulled the comment. He did it, not me.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of how a culture can change like that when all you do is set expectations and hold to it.
And like you said earlier, it opens up the way for a lot more productive conversations to happen.
Totally. And so this morning, we crossed 100,000.
It's amazing.
So you and I are both in Ryan Stewman's sales talk for sales pros group. They have 103,000.
Yeah.
How many years has he been working on that?
It's crazy. That's how
2015.
Exciting.
14.
That's how exciting the drone business and just drones in general are, and people are so excited about it. So that's amazing. Congratulations on that. It's huge.
Thank you. So now I'm bringing in our first expert to come in and talk and do a live stream.
Nice.
They are flipping out over it because it's a well-known individual. He's been in the industry for a while and he's prominent. And so they're just like, this is great. They're like literally like kids writing to Santa Claus. I want to ask him about this. I want to ask him about this. They're like literally putting a list in.
Yeah.
These are people who are thirsty, and it's just great because all we're doing is we're just setting the expectation and the group is doing what it's doing because we defined it.
100%. And so like a big way that we define that in our companies is core values. So have you experienced any pitfalls when companies are doing that they kind of need to watch out for?
They're defining their core values?
Yeah, because like right now we're hiring and firing based on core values, right? We do the DISC profiles and all that, and we compare them to our current top producers and stuff. But for the most part, if we feel like they don't have the same core values, then we don't hire them. And then once we hire them, it's in the handbook. It's all over our walls. We say it in every meeting. So they are established. Have you seen any pitfalls, the way that can come back and kind of bite you in terms of HR?
I have. What some people will do is like a mission statement. They write a mission statement because somebody tells them that they have to, and then they never live up to it. That's no different than a company writing hiring me to do a handbook for them and they never use it. Core values aren't going to mean jack unless you actually live to them. And so just like anything else, when you put something out there, understand you're setting the expectation. And when you don't live up to that expectation, people know that they can walk all over you.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like, you're a big wuss or a coward or anything. It's just like, they will never take you seriously and you will always be frustrated. you won't be frustrated until you clean out those that are not willing to, hey, look, the bus is leaving, you're either on it or not. And
Right.
if you don't clean house that way, or you don't work with people so that way they can become a, I don't want to say a better version of themselves, but a version of themselves that resonates with the values of the organization, because that at that point would be individual self-development. You are always going to be frustrated because people are not going to meet your expectations because you're not holding them to it. It's expectations are not hard. Now, can you have the wrong expectations of people? Like, yes, you absolutely can. And usually what I've found is that when managers get upset, and like mid-level managers, and they start judging people because they're measuring somebody else against their own values.
Right.
And it's like teamwork. I hate that word unless you clearly define what teamwork means. If I were to ask you in one word, what is the most important aspect to you in teamwork, what would it be?
One word.
One word.
Progress.
Okay. Mine's competency. So
Okay.
if we're both cheering, teamwork, 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 are we on the same page? No. Not even remotely close. Those aren't even neighbors, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. So when you have a middle manager or anybody who's using their individual core values to judge and evaluate the actions of somebody else without the company saying, no, this is how we make our decision, that's how the floor drops out from underneath everybody. And now you have a contentious environment.
Okay. So you create the core values, and one of our core values is we operate with integrity. So
Yeah.
we should take it a step further when we're training on these core values and say, and what we mean by that is basically the price we tell the customer is the price. And if we have bad news for the customer, we give it to them before they sign the contract, right? And then within our organization, we operate with integrity. We don't, salespeople are pretty notorious for not oversharing. What's the word I'm trying to?
Overselling and
overselling. Yes, and under delivering, right? We're going to over deliver and undersell. So, so taking it a step further and actually giving, some examples and situations so you can really hone in on what that means, because it could mean a lot of things to a lot of people, right? And it always, I've had salespeople throw the core value back in my face before because, 17 variables are in between what we said was going to happen and what actually happened. And those variables changed, and we're trying to adapt the variables. We're trying to make the end result happen, but there's only so much that we can do before we lose all of our money and close shop. You know what I'm saying? So that's where it gets tough. The more time in between the statement of integrity and the result of that integrity, then the more it can get messed up. So if you say it, you've got to be able to deliver it. And that's one of the hardest things.
It is. And, we're kind of facing something like that at the drone farm, to be honest with you. And this is not a bad thing to talk about. So, in the market, there is a very strong desire for counter drone technology. And there's a short version. I won't bore you too much, but it is kind of fascinating. There is some complication with a couple of laws out there in regards to the FCC. Mm-hmm. So the FCC has deemed that it's unlawful to disrupt or pony or kidnap or whatever you want to call it, the signal, the radio frequency that exists between the drone controller and the drone itself, right? It's not a fine line. It's like, boom, this is it. If it interrupts it, if it taps onto it, that's a problem, right? So we have a need for counter UAS technology. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, and it's not meant to terrify anybody, but it's a fact. You can look it up. It's open source information at this point. But the FBI released at the beginning of the year, or like November of last year, that the prior year, there was our first drone attack on our infrastructure here in the United States, our first domestic drone attack. Somebody attempted to fly a copper cable into a substation in southern Pennsylvania. The drone failed, thank goodness. Otherwise, it would have taken out a part of our power grid.
Okay.
That's a big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just like people do crazy things all the time. So in order for the government to be able to test counter UAS, they have to find favor with the FCC. Well, guess what? The FCC says, not on this land, you're not going to do that. So we have that complication because the drone farm does support government business, domestic government business, domestic agencies. And so one of the questions is like, well, how do we get to yes without compromising our core values? And one of our core values is that we do things like safety of the national airspace is our number one priority. Okay. Because if we're focused on the safety of the national airspace, it means that we're focused on the safety of everybody.
Right.
So in order for us to be able to support like a DoD initiative that has to do, as an example, but we don't right now, but if this is like in our conversations, it's like, if there's counter UAS technology, how do we get to yes without negatively impacting the environment?
Right.
And that's the question to ask. How do we get to yes? So, if there's, several different reiterations and somebody's saying, well, this isn't fair. It's like, okay, great. What are your suggestions? How do we get to yes? How do we
That's
make
the question
this
to
happen?
ask?
Put it right back on the person that's frustrated about something, because if they're not part of the solution, they're part of the problem, even though they may be absolutely operating in integrity by pulling something, challenging something forward. It's like, okay, great. How do we get to yes? How do we do this? If you see this as a gap, help us be successful.
So that's a big initiative in our company right now. Wayne came out with it probably a couple weeks ago. He got tired of salespeople bringing problems to him, right? So now that we're in solar, we have a 33-point touch process that takes a customer from closed to install. You know what I mean? And so it is complicated. There's permits involved. There's construction. Yeah. There's, whole crews getting sick with COVID. You know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of
supply chain issues.
Yeah, supply chain issues. So there's all these things that can go wrong from, the close of a customer's home to the install. Yeah. And so what he started telling his guys is, hey, I know you have problems. I know we have problems. Start bringing me, 3 possible solutions instead of just bringing me the problem and making me figure it out, because you multiply 20 deals going on by, 3 problems they may have throughout, and then the couple of solutions that he's got to find. I mean, that means he's finding 40 to 50 solutions a week. One person only has so much decision-making capability, And so since they've started doing that, they started bringing him the solutions. His peace of mind and his job has gotten so much easier because he can say, okay, A, B, or C, let's go with B. That worked on the last deal, and we'll move forward on it. And that's been working really well for him. And so I'm going to, obviously have him listen to this episode and talk about that. What's the best way to get to yes, basically, is
how do we get to yes?
Something else he can implement there. So go ahead.
My favorite all-time boss, you're going to love this story. This is one of the best boss stories I've ever had. My favorite all-time boss just retired a year ago. And I told him, I said, you remember when we had that one meeting with this one girl? He goes, oh yeah, I do. Said, there were moments that this man has said things of sheer brilliance that I'm like, damn, I wish I would have said that. Mm-hmm. All of us know, never complain to Tom.
Okay.
Because Tom literally gets really calm, and then it's like, as soon as he relaxes and he crooks and he has this little wink and his little twinkle in his eye and a cook in his mouth, I'm like, here it comes. So we went into this team meeting, and it was one of the few ones that I got to sit in because I was never really part of the management meetings. He wanted to have that solely with himself, with the sales managers. I totally respect that, but I had to come in and talk up a process that was being introduced and blah, 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 and make sure that they had any questions. Well, as soon as we got there, it was so we just promoted 3 new managers, and we promoted from within. So he gets in, and this one woman sits down, and she immediately starts bitching and complaining about 7 people doing exactly the same thing, blah, blah, blah. All of us know better because we've worked with Tom long enough, and we've all hung ourselves in this. We all shut up and just listen. And so I looked over at Tom, and I saw the twinkle in his eye and his mouth. I'm like, here it comes. And she's like, blah, blah, blah. And we need to figure out what we're going to do this. And he went, congratulations. You just volunteered yourself to fix it. And she goes, son of a.
It's very true, though.
It's just
true.
like the hazing is done, folks.
Yeah. You're the most qualified person to fix this now.
Absolutely. And that's what and he's smiling the whole time doing it. He says, congratulations. You just volunteered yourself to fix it. And she's like, God. It was so funny. And we're all laughing because we all know, because we've all done it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and it only takes once. But that was what he did. So that was his way of saying, how do we get to yes then?
Yeah.
It's like, how do we take ownership? And yeah, I've done it too. And it's brilliant. That man was just brilliance in leadership. It was just amazing.
It's awesome when you have people that impact you like that and you can keep a little piece of them and use it moving forward. Okay. So you've told me this story before, but I want our listeners to hear it too. What took you from, because we were kind of joking about it earlier, how they're so aligned, HR to drones?
Drones. Yeah. So the original backstory, the big backstory, the nitty gritty piece of it, he's going to chime in apparently, is that my dad has Alzheimer's.
Uh-huh.
And, my dad did about as much as he could. He did very well for a long time, but over the course of, let's say 15 years, he lost a couple $1 million. Mm-hmm. To bad investments, bad market changes. He trusted people that did not have his best interest at heart. And inevitably, I wound up coming in when he was no longer capable of taking care of himself, became his trustee. And I looked, holy shit, we're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I got to figure out what to do. So I started investing, I kicked in my entrepreneurial spirit that I have and started looking around. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine. He's like, you should run for, he says, you should go for this contract in government contract. And he's only thinking HR. And I'm like, I don't want to do HR government contracting.
Yeah.
Are you crazy? I'm not happy with it now as it is. Why would I want to do it for get bound into a contract that I'm going to hate for 5 years? I don't care what the money is. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to be tied to something for 5 years, it's going to be more than $60,000 worth,
Right.
So I started looking, I started thinking, I'm like, why the hell am I not in government contracting? So I started paying attention and looking to see what I could do. And, I tried several things. Like I competed for, selling janitorial supplies. I started competing, selling for office supplies, PPE during COVID. Thought I was smarter than everybody else. That was a crock.
Yeah.
And then I was doing like large cans of food for large cafeterias, like prisons. And I'm just like, none of this is sexy. But then I saw this drone thing that popped up. And I'm like, drones. And I know that, coming from the days when I was with the space agency here in Virginia, drones is an up and coming thing. We're not at the early adapter stage anymore. We're past that. We're at the second adapter stage, but nonetheless, we're in it. Right. So I started doing some research. I'm like, where are the drones? Like, who's buying these drones? And then I started seeing law enforcement and I went instantly. I'm like, boom, there you go. I've got this whole, Rolodex full of Navy SEALs that I've known and come to love for over the last several years and have helped out through their career transition and whatnot and doing all that volunteer work. It's like, that's top tier knowledge that can be transferred into law enforcement using technology that they've been dealing with for 15 years longer than those guys. Right. And I'm like, marriage right there, problems being solved right there. Cause that's the big thing. It's like, if you go into a business to solve other people's problems. Don't come up with an idea saying, hey, I bet you somebody wants to buy this. If it doesn't solve a problem, they're not going to pay attention to you. Right. So, and ultimately, unfortunately, that's what was happening to me in the HR field, is that it started off good, but for 10 years, literally it was doing this. And I didn't necessarily see it until I got to the point in the last several years where it's just like somebody comes to you for help, you give them the answer, and then they look at you like you're a three-headed dragon can turn people into pillars of salt. It's just like, are you freaking crazy? It's like, why would I want to do that? That means that I have to interrupt my whole operation and blah, blah, blah. It's going to take time away. And what's the likelihood that we're even going to get caught? It's like, well, good luck with that.
Exactly.
Like, you came to me for the question. Don't get angry because you don't like the answer when it's, we have a legal infrastructure. I can't control that. I can tell you how to work within it and be successful, and they just don't want to hear it. So I saw things going out from underneath me, and then unfortunately my market didn't spend money. They don't know how to ask their bosses for money to like improve themselves, and they're afraid of it, and they'll come right out and tell you. So it's not anything that they haven't heard from me either. So I'm like, yeah, this is not going anywhere fast. So I started looking at the drone thing, started studying, started researching, started getting out in advertising, and we have done some training, which is really awesome. Then I got the phone call. It's like, hey, I got a SEAL that wants to open up a drone range. Fabulous. That was in my 3-year plan. It came a lot sooner. I jumped on it. Now we're working on getting that up and going. And then I'm like, God, but man, I want to get back into the coaching thing, but I intentionally held off not doing it until I found something that I knew I could positively impact. Sure enough, drone biz and how to be a successful entrepreneur. It's so fresh and so new. And the stuff that I talk about is not anything else that the other drone coaches are out there. They're only focusing on the beginning. I'm focusing on how do you get in, stay, and scale. And we exist in that environment as a mastermind to begin with. And so I'm about ready to launch that mastermind along with a comprehensive course that sets an awesome foundation while somebody's studying for their commercial license to be able to literally come out of the door with the right mindset, the right tools. You teach them the basics and the foundation to be successful, then invite them into the mastermind to continue that development, as we both know works.
Yeah.
When you invest in yourself, you just literally fly.
And it's too bad you don't have a place where there's 100,000 qualified candidates to pull from. No, that's
but in time period of 2 weeks, I have 180, which is amazing.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because we are part of that mastermind, we can kind of see the many masterminds everywhere, Yeah. I have a friend that is a 6-figure barber, right? And he ended up opening a barber college. And, he was talking about wanting to start a barber mastermind. And I'm like, well, the first thing you need to do is join Apex, because they do it right. You know what I'm saying? So learn from them. And I also talked to Ryan about it. Like, what about these niche industries that, like, solar is one of them. Like, our Apex Solar group has like 45 people in it. Like, it's big enough to have its own event, So why not do it with the best in the mastermind business, which is Apex, and partner with them and use their structure, their platform, their talent, you know what I'm saying? And you're not just there talking about drones. You can bring like a Brian McKintrick talking about how to convert leads, you know what I mean? Or a Drew B. Wilson, the follow-up game, And so you can bring in these different things with each thing that you do, and you've got all those resources at your disposal. So,
and that's exactly what I'm doing, to be honest with you. And I've approached every single one of them. It's like, hey, listen, you articulate this much better than I can. I mean, I can do it, but you know what? I would much rather bring in specialists and give you attention. So that way, if somebody wanted to say, love what we're doing here in the drone world, but I could use a little extra help down there, stay in my zone of genius, right? Bring in other people that can help our environment and stay in their zone of genius. And so that's ultimately what I'm doing. And then, invite them to $1 million mastermind. It's like, hey, you want a mind-blowing experience?
Yeah.
You like what we've got down here? Come on down. And then, you know what? If they join both masterminds, now they've just expanded their network even more.
Yeah.
So I'm taking what I have to pipeline in mind with the ultimate end goal of helping to grow Apex, because Apex has given me so much at the same time. But yeah, I mean, it's just like the reason why I chose the people that I chose. Number one, I've got good relationships and good friendships with them, but they have services that can support my community. 100%. And then why not turn our community around and be able to help support the Apex community?
Yeah, it happens to me in consulting all the time. A lot of times I won't take on a client because they're not ready for me yet. You know what I'm saying? But they need these 3 other Apex members that can set them up to get ready, you know. And I just had one reach out to me yesterday. It's like, okay, I'm ready. You know what I mean?
But you know what? That's how you use your network.
100%. Well, and it does. It stops me from doing work that I can do it and I can put it together, but it's not my zone of genius, like you said. It's something that I've done because I have a business, right? And I'd rather put an expert in there, and they're going to spend more money on it, you know. Yep. But by the time they get to me, they're going to be built on a solid foundation to where I don't have to go backwards and fix this, and it's messing up my sales program that I built out for them, you know.
Right.
So that's a big deal.
Right. And, you know, the thing is that you're talking the solar language. I'm talking the drone language. The entrepreneur language is always going to be the entrepreneur language.
Yeah, it's universal.
You have to it is, but you have to take entrepreneur and mesh your own message in it with industry specific. And that is the key to being that unique. You know, I see couple, and I'm not bashing anybody. I mean, I like what the other companies out there that are trying to sell their courses and putting stuff out. But, you know, the thing is that it's a commodity. It's not an actual network. And I'm in it for the culture and the network because I am witness and I'm a part of something greater. I know that formula can work here too. And so there's nothing more gratifying than being, and you've done it. I know you've done it. We've all done it at Apex. We show up a little bit broken.
Yeah.
We go away being totally fortified and forged, you know. We're armed and ready for the next 30 days or the next quarter, you know, whatever the integral is next year, you know, if you only go to MDM. But that's the benefit, and that's the whole purpose of a mastermind that we've seen works, is that you come in battered and beaten up because that's what life does to you. That's what business does to you. But you leave re-energized, you're supported, you feel good about yourself because was that oh man, what is the music video with the bee dancers from the 90s? Who is that?
Oh man, I have no idea.
You know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
Yeah, the happy bee people. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, somebody's gonna put it in the comments. Let them put it in the comments. They know exactly who it is. No pain.
No pain.
Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Now, and we're gonna as soon as we get done, I'm gonna remember what it is. I'm gonna like, damn it, I'm gonna send it to you. So, but it's the same thing. It's just like you find your tribe, right? Yeah. That's what it's all about. But the tribe doesn't already exist. The tribe has to be led and it has to be developed, and that's what's so amazing about what we get to experience. But we take that energy of the tribe and we take everybody's collective knowledge and we work to grow. And you know what? If you don't apply it, you don't apply it.
Yeah.
But you might apply it at some other point in time.
That's the crazy part too, is so much of the energy that I've come home with has come from me pouring into others, you know?
Yeah.
And you go there depleted, but then you see a need and you service that need without expectation of anything in return. And what you get in return is you're re-energized when you go home. And you're re-energized, and then you're revalidated in your zone of genius, you know. And it happens all the time. I'll be down in the dumps, you know. I'll go to a Fly-In Friday. I go to a live, you know. I'll go to a RBO mastermind, and somebody asks me a question, and then I'm there for the next 30 minutes just talking their ear off, and they're sitting there writing notes and like, you know, writing things down to go back and implement. And then once you're done with that, you're just like on Sky 9 again, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
look how many people wanted you to go into the energy drink business. Look how many people wanted you to go into the energy drink business because of what you did.
Yeah.
You know how many people, like, literally it's like, dude, you got to do this, and this is how you do it, and this is they're like literally laying out the road. Where else would you find something like that? Yeah, I
mean, there's so many. If I did decide to go down that route, which I just don't want another business right now.
Well, I know you're not.
Wait, each year at MDM, I'll come out with a new flavor, and I'll make sure I'll work with Tyler before, and I'm like, Tyler, we got to get in a place that lets us hand these things out. But anyways, come out with a new flavor, and People will be banging down our door to work for us just to get the energy drinks. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah.
No, but it has created an amazing presence in our community, as well as far beyond that, because they're handing them to their friends and family. And people they reach out to me all the time. It's like, hey, this thing is amazing. I saw you did solar. My nephew's doing solar, and he's not doing very well. Do you have any advice for him? Like, I had that happen last week. And so I reached out to their nephew, and I gave him some advice and stuff like that. And he just got his first sale today, which was really cool. And I'm not going to get, I mean, you know how it goes. Like, you do something like that, and then like 6 months later, he's calling you up saying like, hey, I want to come work with you, or his friend, calls you. That's how it always happens. It's usually not so direct, but it always happens by association typically. All right, so you've got Navy SEALs.
Blind Melon.
Blind Melon?
Blind Melon, that's the name of the band.
I have to hear it. I'm terrible with names.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
yes.
I would have to hear it. But I'm going to look it up after we get off the call.
Yeah, do it. Blind Melon, No Rain. I was close. No pain. It's No Rain.
Okay. So with your...
The Happy Bee people.
With your drone business, you've got Navy SEALs training law enforcement and forensic technicians. Mm-hmm. And so that's because of the relationships you had from your time volunteering as in the Navy SEAL community. And so what were you doing with them? You were transitioning them from the military to the private sector?
Yes. So I am one of the original coaches from the East Coast. We started 6.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so it started with Navy SEALs, and then it's now opened up to all branches of special operations in the military. And what we do is I volunteer 32 weeks of the year, 2 different cohorts, one in the spring, one in the fall, here in Virginia Beach. And then I have what's called a fellow, and usually it's a Navy SEAL. Mm-hmm. It can be Green Beret, it can be, Marine from RSOC. And so we take them through a 13-week course, executive level course that helps them find their why. We give them the tools to look for a job, write a resume, do interviews, how to network, and then teach them a very high level, keeping it on the wave tops, about business culture and general. And it splits into 2 divisions. It's either the entrepreneurial side, which they tend to, throw that towards me, or at the corporate sector, which they also tend to throw at me because of the HR experience and the Fortune 500 and everything. So, been doing that for quite a while. So and then once I started doing that, I want to volunteer more in the Navy SEAL community in Naval Special Warfare. So I'm part of the UDT SEAL Association, which is the actual fraternity I got sponsored in, and I do the reunions. I'm there volunteering. It's just like, whatever. If they have an event, I show up and I'm like, okay, where do you want me? It's like, I've got to the point where it's like, I don't even tell them I'm coming. They know, they're like, oh, Brenda's here, sticker over counting tickets or whatever. And, I'll bust my butt, giving back to, and it's not just to them, it supports their families. When we do the reunions, the teams open up what they call their gidunk, where they set up a tent and they've got their coins and their shirts and their mugs, and like I'll show up with about $1,000 in cash, and I'll buy a bunch of that stuff because that money goes towards their Christmas parties and their family events and stuff like that. And cool. I have a wardrobe of Navy SEALs, shirts and hats and jackets, and you should see I have a badass coin collection. But sometimes, the extra stuff that I get supporting them, it's just like, if I see somebody that's doing something really cool, I'm like, here, by the way, here's a coin from SEAL Team 2 or SEAL Team 4, or if they've helped, SEAL that, needed assistance or something like that, then I'll give them something like, hey, I just want to say thank you for that. And if they're like, oh, really? Like,
that's so cool.
But it helps everybody. That's the point. So you never run around and pretending you're something that you're not, though.
Yeah, 100%. I know exactly what you mean. So you've got employees and contractors who are, I would say, incredibly experienced at, the drone business, right? Because it was part of their job description in the past, right? So my question is, and then the way I'm going to relate this is, when I first started out in door to door, I had to hire nothing but people that had more experience than me, because I started at the top, right? Which is a very difficult place to start from if you want to create like long-term loyalty. You don't grow with your team, right?
Right.
And so I feel like you're kind of similar in that sense, even though you speak their language because you've been volunteering for them for a long time, but they have the expert training in the drone flying and drone training. So how do you kind of, I guess, bridge that gap?
Merge it together.
Yeah. And I imagine by now you're kind of on that level anyways, but when you first started out, I would imagine you had to kind of bridge that gap.
So what I did is I spent 2 weeks at 2 different conventions sitting down, listening, and I wrote down every problem that every law enforcement officer talked about.
Okay.
And what I did is I put all of that on a spreadsheet, and then I looked at all these problems and I went, we can solve that, we can solve that, we can solve that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started putting solutions based off of what I know these guys' capabilities are. And really, it's not so much the drone piece of it as it is the mindset piece of it. And so the things that SEALs are really good for. Now, a lot of people have a misconception of what SEALs really are because of only what Hollywood tells them.
Right.
You likely won't know what a SEAL looks like if you bumped into one.
Honestly,
you really would.
The several that I've met from Apex and then I've met in the past, you wouldn't, they're fit and they're somehow both really handsome, but I don't understand that part. Where's the qualifier in there? But anyways, but you expect this like jacked, like huge, like, 6'5", and so that's not the case. But anyways, continue.
No, it's not. Yeah. No, it's not. And so these guys are masters. It's a quality that's within them. And it comes out throughout their training. And that is, okay, here's our situation, which means that here are our boundaries. And we talked about that earlier, right? How do we work within those boundaries, but get the job done? And the way I explain it, I can't remember what book it was that I read. I don't know if it was Jason Redman's book or it was one of the earlier ones. So anyway, this one guy was talking about how they were somewhere down in the deep South at one of the training camps down there. They were out for a night on the town. And this is like the best example I can ever come up with. And so there's 2 locals that started kind of getting on these guys for whatever reason. They probably assumed that they were SEALs or that they were spec ops or something like that. And they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So they started giving them a hard time, like, tough guy, we're going to take you out, show you what we're made of, right? Kind of thing. Well, anyway, it's like, look, team guys don't like getting into fights. They want to go and fight the good fight, but they don't want to get into fight with locals, right? It's not what they want.
Counter what they're built to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's stupid and ridiculous on top of it. So anyway, one guy, instead of actually getting into a fight, this is how quick they think, right? This is how they deconflict really fast. Instead of actually, this guy tries to throw blows with them. And instead, what does he do? Instead of punching back, he grabs a cigarette and shoves it up his nose. And immediately stop the guy, burning cigarette up his nose, immediately stop this guy from wanting to fight him. That's how fast they think. They think through situations because they train in all of these different scenarios. They're constantly made to fail. So when they are put to the test, just like us, when we fail, we're put to the test. We know that we can get through anything because we have seen and shook the hand and embraced and leaned into failure as much as we don't like it and it sucks.
Right.
We have this level of confidence, right? That's what these guys know. Would you rather be at the bar with your buddy who's going to get into a fight, or would you rather be with the guy who snuffs it out by shoving a cigarette in somebody's nose? I want to be with option B.
Yeah.
Right? We have a better chance of surviving in option B.
I'm just not going to the bar, damn it.
The glass isn't half empty. It's not half full. There isn't a glass.
Yeah, that's where I'm at in life right now. That's right. I'm just not going to the bar.
So these guys are awesome at looking at a situation and seeing all of the options. And they have a line of sight that most people don't, but they know how to work within the right and the left. So when we did a course with the very department that I'm actually a deputy at, you know, I was the rabbit in this day. We went through 2 full days. And so Ethan, who I was working with, who is a lieutenant, he's out now, but he was standing back, and we'd have everybody turn around, including Ethan. And then I would go hide in the parking lot. So they'd have to launch the drone and figure out where I was. Now, bear in mind, I'm wearing a vest that says UAS in the back and a hot pink shirt. I'm not going to be difficult to find. But I never went even near the same spot I was before.
Right.
Like I went all the way to the other side of the parking lot, and they had to fly through. They found it. They found me. They never gave me an indicator that they found me, because I thought they found me. It turns out they didn't. I stood up like a gopher, and they're like, "Shit, they said we couldn't find you." I'm like, "I was in the shadow," you know. And it's just like, "Oh, we weren't looking in the shadow." Ethan knew where I was, you know, because I was texting him. And then the second time they turned around, I sat right up next to the front door on the building, and I squished down. I just sat with my haunches up, and they're flying around the parking lot trying to find me. And finally they're like, once they saw my shirt, and they're like, "God, we never would have thought to look there." Well, the third guy that went, I almost got run over. But I went underneath the Toyota truck that was right next to where they were standing. I was 10 feet away from them. Yeah. And so it's a famous picture of me underneath this truck in my bright pink shirt and my Ray-Ban glasses on, you know, and the owner of the truck comes out, and he leans out and he says, "Do you mind if you move?" No, I don't mind at all. And everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, we never would have," you know. It's just like, that's what they do, right? That's what team guys do. They don't put themselves in that position of, we never would have thought of that. It's like, what are we not thinking of? Right. So if you ever watch any of the documentaries, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. You ever watch any of the documentaries on Neptune Spear, which is the mission that got Osama bin Laden? If you listen to the mission planning, the story behind that is that they basically locked themselves into a room for like 2-3 weeks and hashed out every possible scenario that could go wrong to make sure that they were prepared for everything. I mean, whatever it was, the dog got sick, you know, the dog got the runs, whatever, it didn't matter, right? They walked through it. When they got to the point where they felt very comfortable, they worked through everything. They get up, they head towards the door. Somebody stops and says, "Wait a minute, what happens if one of the helicopters crash?" They turned right back around, and they sat down again, and they hashed it out. Wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happened. They had a helicopter that crashed. So that meant that they were prepared, right? That is how intense they think when it comes to what's going on. And when they challenge something, if you've ever been on the receiving end of a team guy or a SEAL challenging you, they're not being assholes. They're just going through what they're naturally designed to do. And their training brings all of this out. And I'll sit down and I'll start talking about something related to HR. And it's like, "Well, what about this? And what about this one? What about this one?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." I said, "Are you mission planning?" I said, "I'm just explaining it." Man, I need a shot now. You know, it's just,
you're making me think too hard.
I know. I said, this was supposed to be fun, you know? And so, but that's just how they think, right? And the boat guys are the same way. Swick are the same way, because they work with them, and they're conditioned to think through. So there's a natural phenomenon that happens, is that when anybody feels pressure and stress, like if you ever notice that we get tunnel vision, like our apertures start to close. Yep. It's a natural defense, and we can only see this. We can't see anything else. That's a skill where you have to breathe, and you have to learn how to open your aperture. And again, that's what those guys are good at. So when we get into training, our clients, they tell us, we want more pressure. And there's nothing more that a SEAL wants to hear than pressure. And they're like, "No problem." Yeah. You know? And we apply pressure. We have an indoor training element now over at the drone farm that we can, it's hard enough to fly through that with a drone and just an image and a maze that you know nothing about. Well, you know what? We're really going to mess with you, because now we're going to put a smoke bomb in there. Oh, and man. Now you really have to figure that out, right? That's what crazy. They want. Yeah. And so I have that natural ability as well to think of, well, what if we did this? What if we intensified this? What if we did? So we all work well together, because we have like-minded mindsets, but I don't tell them what to say. Once they get into their rhythm, they don't need to know how to fly a drone. What they do is they're excellent at taking these guys and helping them expand their thinking, opening that aperture. Have you thought about this? Here's my story. Here's what we did.
Yeah.
We should have knocked on, we didn't have to try and blowtorch the thing open. The door was unlocked and none of us ever thought to turn the damn knob. We walked right on in, and it's like, just sometimes from the smallest things to the biggest things, we don't open our aperture. And so that's what we bring to the table when it comes to that kind of training.
That's massive. I mean, critical thinking, drone training. I mean, if you could just package that and put it out there to law enforcement, they're going to eat it right up, because that's what they need. Too many officers get in a situation, whether they're the ones flying the drone or they're the ones, in the firefight, and they don't have that critical thinking training. How do you train for a firefight? Well, SEALs know how to.
Yeah. And you know what? And I know these guys well enough. One scenario that we did when I was the Rabbit, I didn't even tell Ethan what I was doing. They sent in, they were talking about officers with 7 times the amount of training that I have and experience, right? So there I am. I'm laying on the ground, acting like a decedent, and I have a blue rubber gun on my chest right here. And so I hear on the radio, and I didn't even tell Ethan I was going to fool him. I had it like here. It looked like I was like out. And so as the drone is watching, I knew the drone did not have the best angle. I knew that the officer wasn't taking it seriously. I stood up and I mimicked that I was firing him. And all of a sudden I hear the drone pilot going, "Holy shit, she's still alive," and we debriefed about it. And Ethan says, "Okay, what could we have done better?" Because Brenda gave you a real life example that can happen. So 100%. Yeah. But that's what we do. We keep it real,
No, that's awesome.
We lay on the challenge. So it's a lot of fun. Being the Rabbit's a blast, I gotta tell you.
You probably had no idea when you started volunteering with the Navy SEALs that it would all turn into a business someday, But that just goes to show the giver's gain, And so that's a great story of that. One of the questions I like to ask towards the end of the podcast is, I talk a lot about legacy. I'm giving a talk on it here in a couple weeks. And I'm excited about it. It's at Philip Sessions' event that he's been advertising. But anyways, so my question is, legacy, what does that mean to you? And then what do you want yours to be?
Oh, man. It's interesting that you say that. So have you ever watched the series Band of Brothers?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so you've got a movie marathon ahead of you.
Okay.
The Band of Brothers was an HBO special that came out many years ago. It was spawned from from the idea of Saving Private Ryan. Tom Hanks was one of the executive producers. Steven Spielberg, I believe, was also a part of it.
Nice.
Just absolute amazing story of the path during World War II that Easy Company took from the paratroopers. And it's a band of brothers that started all the way from basic training that made it all the way to the end. Obviously all of them didn't make it, but they had this one guy. He had the best sense of humor ever. See, he's telling you about it too. The best sense of humor, and he's doing his job. So we had somebody try and break into the house several months ago, so he can bark all he wants.
Yeah,
as far as
I understand.
Yeah. So, because I know you remember that story when it came out, but anyway, so this one gentleman, he made it through all the way, and he was so well liked. Like, he never had anything bad to say about anybody. He had everybody's back. He made people laugh. He was, he would imitate people. Like, he was the class clown, but he was the one that everybody loved the most. I think something like over 1,000 people came to his funeral.
Wow.
And it's funny because I was listening to Thomas Keenan's podcast this morning with Mark Zalmanoff, and they were talking about, like most people, when you die, Mark has this really morbid theory on death.
Yeah.
And he's like, when people die, they usually say like, oh, that's too bad. I knew that guy. That was, like, to have 1,000 people show up at your funeral says something about you. Mm-hmm. You impacted that many people in your lifetime. And that to me is legacy. It's like when you're gone and people recognize the gift that whatever it was that you gave them and that you touched them in that lifetime, that's legacy to me. You may not be able to leave anything tangible behind, mm-hmm. but you leave a spirit of compassion, love, empathy, something that you gave them. That's a legacy.
Yeah, and it's so awesome to hear the answers because everyone is different, and that's the first time I've heard that one, and I love it because I can think of about family wise. Most of the time when people go to funerals, it's for family, right? And when we talk about our network, we always say family of choice, right? Yeah. And so I can definitively say, if anything happens to you, I will be at your funeral, 100%.
I will be happy to be at yours. And that doesn't usually come out well from the HR lady.
No, it doesn't.
It's like the Grim Reaper just showed up. No, but I see, like, because I'm in this SEAL network, mm-hmm. and I get every week I get a notification that some SEAL has passed. Yeah. And I always hold my breath because I'm like, please, it's just like, even if I don't know who they are, I still take time to read that bio, mm-hmm. and I read who they were and what they were about, because they left a legacy on this country and it needs to be honored, whether I knew them or not. And some of them I do know. And it's just like, Rudy, remember Rudy Bosch from the very first Survivor series?
No, my in-laws would know it though.
Yeah.
I never really watched Survivor.
I got to attend his funeral. And I know his daughters really well, and I got a chance to know Rudy, and Rudy also had Alzheimer's as well. So, but towards the end, and he'd just sit there like, yeah, I like you. I was like, all right, that's cool, Rudy. Thank you. He didn't remember me 10 minutes later, but he's like, you're all right. I was like, okay, thanks.
Sometimes those little compliments go a long way,
Yeah. And that's a big one. That was a big one for Rudy. It's like Rudy, if your hair was like, they joked at his funeral that he was up in heaven telling everybody to get a haircut. It's just like, he just had those standards, Yeah. So yeah, to have Rudy Bosch tell you that he liked you that's about as big as it gets.
That's awesome. Well, Brenda, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and sharing so much value from HR to Navy SEALs to drones. I mean, it's just been a really cool,
thank you,
really cool and interesting podcast. We get so tactical on this show sometimes, and it's like, I'm sure our listeners like the relief every now and then of just having someone interesting on the show, but they got a lot of tactical HR advice as well. So I thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If anyone wants to reach out, especially about the drone business or HR, yes. Where do they find you at?
Best place to find is just to hit me up on any of my social. It's easier to find me at brendaneckvatal.com. I know you're going to put that all in the show notes and everything, but you can DM me on my social. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn and YouTube. And then, if you wanted to, you can always check out the Drone Biz Coach Academy. I had to think through it. Drone Biz Coach Academy. And, if you're interested, I've got videos and links and stuff like that that's up on the upcoming course that's actually available now. And then soon after that, the mastermind. And then if you want to get into, you want to jump into the business group side of it and the drones, then it's Drone Talk for Drone Pros.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Everybody starts following that format now.
Hey, you know what? When a recipe makes good cookies. But I will tell you that our mastermind, our big masterminds, is going to be called Level Up and Soar.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Very cool.
Yeah. So.
Well, Brenda, I appreciate it so much. And it's like I always say at the show, let's get building.
Yes, I'm loving it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Building Great Sales Teams. We sure do appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. This way you'll get notifications as new episodes become available. Remember, great sales teams are not recruited. They are built block by block. Until next time.